Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So we will just start. Endocrine disrupting chemical is an exogenous substance or mixture that alters the functions of the endocrine system and consequently causes adverse health effects in an instant organism, its progeny, or subpopulation. EDCs are now recognized as a public health priority and an emerging policy issue for strategic approach to international chemicals management, or SICHEM, which is now known as the Global Framework on Chemicals. They are associated with hormone-related cancers, obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and reproductive problems. Exposure to EDCs occurs through consumer products and environmental pollution. The health risk of EDCs are especially high for exposure occurring in infants and children, pregnant women, and other vulnerable populations. In Asia, several countries have already established or policy frameworks, including
Hey, Trippy, I think your voice is
and Sri Lanka, among others with oh, I'm sorry. I hope I'm audible now.
yes, now we can hear you now.
Thank you. So yes, so I was saying that there are existing policies, but there are other countries where the policies are lacking. So we will discuss the implementation of the policies and what are the roles of civil societies in this. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. On behalf of IPEN South Asia and Southeast Asia Hubs, WIOEH and KFIF, I'm pleased to welcome you all to this webinar, EDC Free Asia, Regulatory Policies and Frameworks Addressing Environmental and Human Exposures to EDCs. This webinar is also in collaboration with the IPEN POs who have been a part of implementing the EDC Free Asia projects in 2022 and 2023. In Southeast and East Asia, we have the Consumers Association of Penang, or CAP, in Malaysia, Research Center for Gender, Family and Environment, CGFED, in Vietnam, Gita Pertiwi in Indonesia, Ecological Observation and Wetland Conservation, ECOTON, in Indonesia, Eco-Waste Coalition in Philippines, Ban Toxins in Philippines, and Interfacing Development Interventions for Sustainability, or IDIS, in Philippines. From South Asia, we have Environmental and Social Development Organization in Bangladesh, Center for Public Health and Environmental Development in Nepal, Toxics Link in India, Prithvi Innovations in India, and Center for Environmental Justice in Sri Lanka. I am Tripti Arora, joining you today from India. I'm working as the South Asia Regional Coordinator and the Gender Coordinator for IPEN. I will be your moderator for this webinar along with my colleague and my dear friend, Chinky. Over to you, Chinky.
Thanks, Tripti. Hello, everyone. It's so great to see you in this important learning session on endocrine disrupting chemicals, especially on policies. No, and I'm Chinky Pilino Golye. I'm joining you from the very hot weathered Philippines now. So I work as the Southeast and East Asia Regional Coordinator of IPEN. Um, I also would like to add that last January 2024, there was an excellent in-person conference held in Seoul, and all the POs involved in the project where all the POs involved in the project met in Seoul and shared all our work initiatives and also reflections on the work that we do on the endocrine disrupting chemicals. And we also had a meeting, and during our meeting, the POs raised the concern, the need to discuss and learn more about the policies on EDCs, and that is why we're doing this webinar. So before we dive into the presentations, just a few reminders. So this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be made public on IPEN's YouTube channel. I also would like to invite you all that at the end of this webinar, we will be having a webinar survey. I hope that you will answer the survey questions. And also please stay until the end of the webinar and participate in the question and answer portion. And we have excellent lineup of speakers, but before we go into the presentations, let me request first Manny Calonzo for his welcome message. So let me share this one. Okay.
Thank you very much, Chinky and Tripti, and warm greetings everyone from the ECOACE Coalition based in the Philippines. We thank our webinar co-organizers, panelists, and you, the participants, for coming together to learn about how endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs, are currently regulated. This webinar is the latest offshoot of the recently completed Phase 2 of the EDC Free Asia project, ably led by the Wonjin Institute of Occupational and Environmental Health, in cooperation with IPEN and its participating organizations. I'm really happy that we have assembled quite a team of accomplished experts who will give us an overview of how EDCs are regulated in advanced economies like Japan, Korea, and Europe, and in a developing country like Sri Lanka. Our speakers will provide us with background information about the regulated EDCs and how these regulations came into place, including their scope and limitations. As many of us are working for a toxics-free future, this webinar, I hope, will be able to help in identifying campaign opportunities to control, if not eliminate, some of these EDCs in our respective countries. Of course, we will also need to know the capacities that groups need to possess and nurture for a more effective campaigning. With the adoption last year of the Global Framework on Chemicals for a Planet Free of Harm from Chemicals and Waste, we hope this webinar will also be able to shed light on how the international community can foster greater cooperation to create awareness and understanding on EDCs, as well as promote collaborative actions on EDCs. Thanks for joining us today, and have a good webinar.
Thank you so much, Manny. And as shared, this webinar aims to contribute to deeper knowledge and understanding of existing policies addressing EDCs in Asia and in other regions. So for this, we have an excellent lineup of speakers who are all renowned experts in their respective fields. So the first speaker is Dr. Won Kim to discuss the results of EDC Free Asia results conducted in 2022 and 2023. Dr. Won Kim is from WIOH in South Korea, and he has been working with the Wonjin Institute for Occupational and Environmental Health since 2002. He is the researcher at Institute He's the Director of Research at the Institute, and his research fields include occupational health, public health, and risk assessment. Dr. Won Kim and his team successfully implemented the EDC Free Asia projects in 2022 and 2023 in collaboration with IPEN participating organizations in South Asia and Southeast and East Asia regions, and with funding support from the Korean Financial Industry Foundation. I was lucky to meet him in January in Seoul, where we in person discussed the findings of the EDC project and planned for the future. So over to you, Dr. Kim. Thank you for being with us today.
Hello, everyone. I will share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for your introducing me. My name is Won Kim. I'm working at Wonjin Institute for Occupational and Environmental Health. And I will share some results from the EDC Free Asia project 1 and 2. And I want to share the lessons or insight from this project. At first, this project was designed by three organizations. The Korean Financial Industry Foundation supported the fund, and the IPEN, SEA, and SA networked all the organization in Asian countries, and we together make the plan and develop the design of the project, and make some campaign to be exceeded in the next step. And we presented the technical assistance, for example, analyze the toxic chemicals in the products. So we focused on the endocrine disrupting chemical. As you know, it is very hazardous chemicals, and it is everywhere. And we, in the first round of the EDC project, we focused on phthalates and bisphenol A, which is under the list of 1 based on the EU regulations. And second round of EDC project, we focused on the paraben or triclosan. These 2 chemicals are under the list of 2 for EDC list. So many speakers after me talk about the characteristics of the EDCs. EDCs have 3 main characteristics. The low dose matter and early exposure is very important in the toxicity of the EDCs. And EDCs is everywhere, so we are easily exposed to these chemicals, and we can have experience our cocktail effects from the ubiquitous exposure to the EDCs. So this project was started based on these characteristics of EDCs. So the objective of this project to explore what kind of EDCs are around us and how much EDCs are contained in the products, and we want to find out the solution in the perspective of policy or regulations. So in the first round of the EDC Free Asia project, we make partnerships with 11 participating organizations in 8 countries in Asia, 8 countries in SEA and SA areas. As I already said, EDCs are everywhere, and for example, the citizens continuously exposed to the bisphenol A through touching the thermal papers, and the students may be surrounded by the EDCs. For example, one of the most popular stationery, the erasers, could contain some level of phthalates in it. So we collected the thermal papers to analyze the BPA or PPS or PPF, and we collected the erasures to analyze the phthalate. So we collected about 320 and 340 samples from 8 countries. For the analysis of the bisphenol compounds and phthalates, we used the LC-MS and GC-MS respectively. And this is one of the regions. We analyzed the PPS analogs in thermal papers, and about 45% of samples to be revealed to contain BPA, and about 38% of papers, thermal papers, contain BPAs. And one of the interesting results is that all the samples which have detected to contain the BPA, all the samples exceeded the EU regulatory standard, that is 200 ppm or 0.02% content limit. And we compared the detection rate for BPA or PPS by the country. So in this figure, you can find out that the thermal paper from the Japan, Korea, or Vietnam have relatively high detection rate for BPA compared to other countries. In my knowledge, the concern for the EDCs in Japan are very high, and the citizen groups' power to pressure the government, especially for the hazardous chemical, is very high in Korea. So those kinds of the power or the concern could have some power over the regulation status in the country. So the detection rate for PPA or PPS is very different by the countries. But this is not the happy situation in Japan, Korea, or Vietnam, because PPS is kind of a relative to the PPA. So we have another challenge to overcome to phase out the PPS use in the thermal papers. And the phthalate, we detected, we analyzed phthalates in erasures, and about 30% of phthalates content in the erasures exceeded the Korean standard. In this table, the most abundant species of phthalate was DEHP, one of the most notorious phthalates, and it comprised very high content in the erasures. So this is the findings that we think this is very dangerous situation. And in the second round of EDC project, we focus on the parabens and triclosan in consumer care products. So we make partnership with 12 NGOs in 8 countries. We set some group of products such as baby wipe, deodorant, toothpaste, baby body wash, family dish, or and so on. We collected about 360 products based on the market share and popularity. We only collected the liquid type products because those parabens or triclosan are generally used in the liquid type product. And we also purchased the baby product because this is the EDC project. The baby or children is most vulnerable population in the perspective of health effects from the EDC exposures. And we analyze the paraben or triclosan by using the HPLC measurements. And this is the result from this study. Most of the country, although the regulation level is different by the countries, most of the country have the regulation to open the ingredients of cosmetics or personal care products on their label on the products. But based on our result study, 32 products don't have the ingredient information on their label. So this is the first problem we found. And second one is the incorrect information about of the products. We refer to the information in the label of the products. So 269 products, they don't declare the use of triclosan or paraben in their products. But the result told us that 60 products, in the 60 products, we detected some level of paraben or triclosan in those products, and some of them contained very high level of those EDCs. So we found out there is some incorrect information in the products. And third one is the violation of the regulations. As I said already, the regulation level is different by the countries. So, for example, the Korea have a regulation to limit the methyl paraben use in mouth tissues. This it is 100 ppm, but the babe mouth wipe from Vietnam products exceeded this regulation. And in Korea regulation, there is the triclosan should not be used the products which he used in the mouth. So the one of the products from India, the mouthwash, contained high level of triclosan. So this is the one of the case for violation of the regulation. And fourth finding is the children products and the women product for women. The longer the chain of the paraben, the higher the toxicity it could have. So the propylparaben and the butyrparaben is a very long chain of paraben. So it these two paraben have much higher toxicity compared to the methylparaben. So it is dangerous to use the longer paraben in the children's products. But but based on our analysis, we collected about 116 children products in this project, but we detected some level of propylparaben and butyrparaben in 16% of children products. So this is one of the problem we found, and we think that the products like a feminine washi is really not needed, but in the market there is a feminine wash products in the share of the market. And we collected 31 feminine wash products, and the analysis of result showed that about 30% of feminine wash contained some level of paraben and triclosan or triclocarbon. So this type of products is very sensitive products, and we think the hazardous chemicals such as paraben or triclosan should not be used in this type of products. And this is the worst finding from our study. There was a frag allergens. A frag allergens was used in some products we collected in this project, and it is well known that fragrance allergens is related with contact dermatitis. It is one of the allergic response, and it could also evoke the respiratory effects. In our project, we found out that 14 fragrance allergens was used in 50 products. So this apart from the endocrine disrupting chemicals, these fragrance allergens could be one of the source for the health effects in the personal care products. So this is the final conclusions. As I said in the front of my presentation, it is have three main characteristics. It could be toxic at the very low concentrations, and the earlier it is exposed, the higher the higher the possibility to get a disease which is related to the EDC exposure. And EDC is everywhere. As we found out this project, EDC is phthalate is contained in erasers, PPA or PPS is used in the thermal papers, and parabens or triclosan was contained in so many cancer care products. So the EDC exposures in our living environment is inevitable. So we need stronger regulation based on the precautionary principle, and we need strict national regular monitoring to make our world more safe. This is the result, and this is the conclusion we found in the EDC Free Asia 1-2 project. This is what I prepared today. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for the excellent presentation, Dr. Wan. I think it was very informative and concerning to know that there are still many products that are available which are exceeding the limit for many of these EDCs. So before we proceed to the other speakers, I would like to share a very interesting video that has been produced by WOH to share the findings of this project. And I would also like to give you a minute to think about any questions if you have for Dr. Kim. So we'll play this video and then we'll take 2 to 3 questions for him before we move on to the next speakers.
How can we create a world safe from endocrine disrupting chemicals? Every day we use various consumer chemical products. Some of these products contain endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs. EDCs are chemicals or mixtures of chemicals that interfere with the way the body's hormones work, affecting our health. While we may check ingredient labels when purchasing products, it's not always easy to identify those containing EDCs. If all ingredients comprising a product are not listed on the label, consumers may purchase the product without knowing the exact ingredients, inadvertently exposing themselves to the effects of EDCs. Additionally, even if all the ingredients are listed, ingredients that are exceeding the safety limits could potentially harm human health. Our project aimed to examine the use of EDCs in consumer chemical products sold in Asian countries and highlight the need for stricter regulations. We recruited NGOs across Asia to collaborate by collecting samples of consumer chemical products and participating in the research project. NGOs from 8 Asian countries including Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Nepal, the Philippines, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam worked together to collect research samples. Among consumer chemical products, we selected a total of 11 types of products for our study, focusing specifically on items directly in contact with the body, such as baby wipes, body wash, toothpaste, and deodorants. A total of 362 samples from across Asia were collected, delivered to the lab at the Wanjin Institute for Occupational and Environmental Health, and analysis began conducted. We first checked if harmful EDCs were present in the products, and if present, checked if they exceeded safety limits. We also investigated whether ingredients were properly labeled and if any unlabeled substances were detected. The results were alarming. 32 products didn't have a label of ingredients. EDCs were detected in 60 products where no EDC ingredients were listed on the label. Among them, some products contained high concentrations of parabens and triclosan. In children's products, 19 out of 116 products contained propylparaben and butylparaben, substances that have been banned for use in products intended for children under 3 years old in Denmark for the past decade. In feminine hygiene products, EDCs were found in 29% of the samples. 50 out of a total 362 products contained fragrance allergens, which can cause contact dermatitis and respiratory illnesses, and some are suspected of being endocrine disrupting chemicals. Based on our findings, we held a conference with 12 NGOs from 8 Asian countries, sharing analytic data on EDCs and laying the groundwork for local advocacy campaigns as well as Pan-Asian collaboration to manage EDCs. This marks the first step toward robust regulation of EDCs across Asia. Our research and efforts will continue towards aiming and achieving to create a world where everyone is safe from harmful chemicals and children can grow up healthy.
Thank you for sharing, Chinky, and thank you again, Dr. Kim and Wanjin Institute and Korea Financial Industry Foundation for their support, and our IPEN viewers who participated in this project and contributed to this study. So I will just take 5 minutes and see if there are a few questions. I see there are 2 questions in the chat box. Oh, sorry, the Q&A box. So the first one is, which country has good regulations and policies as regards to BPA and other EDCs from these 8 countries? So Dr. Kim, would you like to address this question?
I think the first question is for me, and the second question is for someone in IPEN, maybe. In this project, we collected information about the regulation in each country. So most of the country which participated in this project have a similar level of regulation because they follow the Asian Cosmetic Directive, which is maybe come from the EU regulations. So they have very similar level of regulation to control the EDC in the personal cosmetics or personal care products. But unfortunately, in Bangladesh and Nepal, there was no regulation about EDC use in the products. So it is a very unhappy situation. And Korea have some more regulation to control the EDCs. For example, in my slide, there was a prohibition of paraben in products for mouth, but there is no regulation in EU and Asian Cosmetic Directive. And recently, Korea have set up the regulation to ban the use of BPA in thermal papers in 2022 years. And Korea have another regulation to ban, to limit the use of phthalate in children's products, not limited to the toys, but the entire products for children. So this kind of regulation is more open to other products. So it is maybe comparatively more some good regulation compared to others. So if you set up your one regulation in your country, you can refer to EU regulation or Korea regulation. So that would be very helpful to make your one regulation in your one country, I think. But the second question is for me or
No, it's
someone?
okay. I can also take that. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Kim, for answering that question. I think it's interesting to know that about the phthalate regulation. So yeah, let's discuss, let's know more in today's session about other policies, and then we will be able to maybe have more discussion on this. And the second question from Anuradha, I think by IPEN, we are still trying to, we are always working towards more products and more EDCs, and we are collaborating with our IPEN POs as we go on. So yeah, we are doing our bit, and we will be connecting with you often and sharing whatever work we have in the coming future. So yeah, thank you. So if there are any other questions, please. If not, then I will move on to our next speaker. Okay. So to present the highlights of EDC policy in Sri Lanka, we have Chalani Rubesinghe, I'm so sorry, Chalani Rubesinghe, who is currently the Project Planning and Management Officer of Center for Environmental Justice. She's engaged in prevention of hazardous chemical contamination through research and awareness since 2012. She has completed her master's in the stream of environmental science, and sharing complicated scientific facts in simple general language is her specialty. She recently developed a course on educating parents and caregivers on exposure pathways of harmful chemicals with a focus on women with IPEN, which was basically a series of 9 courses that we have developed on women and chemicals. And I was lucky to work with Chalani on development of this course. So yeah, she worked with IPEN to inform the Sri Lankan and international community on chemical contaminants and environmental friendly living. She has also authored a chapter on sustainable use of chemicals in practice for storytelling for sustainability in higher education and educators handbook. So thank you for being with us, Chalani. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Tripti. I'm trying to share my screen. Okay. Yeah, greetings, everyone. So it might be morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are joining from. I'm Chalani. Thank you, Tripti, for the lovely introduction. It always inspires me to hear about that course. I think it's really important, and it was an interesting work that I did. So coming to CEJ, Center for Environmental Justice, is an environmental organization in Sri Lanka who's a national level advocate, educator, and of course, policy leader, currently advocating on around 5 thematic areas, namely ecological justice, social justice, political and regulatory justice, economic justice, and climate justice. So our work around these chemicals mostly would lead for some policy and advocacy change. We try to do that. And having said that, let me move on to the studies we conducted around EDCs, because these are the policies that I'm going to talk to you about. So as already Dr. Kim mentioned, we joined with 30 samples of personal care products and hygiene products. And out of 30 samples, 6 were detected with methylparaben, propylparaben, and butyrparaben. And of course, even in Sri Lanka, we found false labeling mentioning that free from paraben, but still having this methyl and propylparaben. So we also did a study on PFAS, which is also another EDC, as well as a persistent organic pollutant. And there we sent 6 samples of water repellent textiles and found 2 with perfluorodecanoic acid, which is also one of the PFAS chemical. And of course, we found bisphenol in baby feeding bottles, plastic baby feeding bottles. And as one mentioned, we in our samples, we found they all contain, except for one among 31 samples, they either contain bisphenol A or bisphenol S. And of course, recycled plastic pellets contain brominated flame retardants, UV stabilizers, and again, bisphenol A as well. And we also did this, we also provided eraser samples. There we found 5 erasers out of 40 having these phthalates. And then sometime back, we contributed with Rubik cubes, and we found these 4 types of POPs, persistent organic pollutants in them. And the conclusion was these are made of recycled plastic, which contain these EDCs and persistent organic pollutants. Of course, coming to the legal provisions. Now, when we study the Sri Lankan standard, we see that there's a good regulation there, because although it's a standard, it's mandatory, because when the cosmetic products are registered, these standards should be met. So unlike many standards that are not mandatory, these standards on cosmetics is mandatory in Sri Lanka. And these specifications have divided the cosmetics into 2 categories, controlled and general cosmetics. So in this controlled category, they have many products, including baby products, and have stringent control measures. But of course, there are omitted ones such as body wash, hand wash, which are not listed under controlled cosmetics. However, the Sri Lankan Standard 457 Part 2 mentions a list of prohibited substances, and in that we see 5 types of parabens. These isopropyl paraben, benzyl paraben, isobutyl, pentyl, and phenyl parabens as prohibited in any amount to be added in any cosmetic. So this comes for both controlled and general cosmetics. And of course, we found bisphenol A among the list. And again, 5 types of phthalates mentioned in this prohibited substances list. I hope this is good news, but still, I won't be happy, because these are, we have to continuously follow and monitor. Without proper surveillance, we cannot assure that cosmetics in the market meet all these mandatories. And again, after the feeding bottle study we conducted with IPEN, we are so happy that we could advocate at least the Sri Lankan Standard Institution to revise its standard on baby feeding bottles and include both bisphenol A and bisphenol S. Currently, this standard is being revised, and soon they will publish. Once they said they wanted to finalize the testing method, which I also got some help from Dr. Cho in identifying and recommending a testing method. And then it's on the way. And then again, Sri Lanka standard specification for single-use containers, including drinking water packaging bottles. They specify phthalate with should not exceed 0.1%. And then last year, the Ministry of Environment published this National Policy on Management of Chemicals, which is would be a policy. It's not a regulation though, but we are planning to advocate through that, because this includes endocrine disruptive chemicals. So I was in this discussion table for several times, and then they decided to go with this chemical of concern title, because they keep changing. So we cannot say phthalate or bisphenol. That was their dialogue. So it's a very good initiative, as I see, because in future we can if we can provide evidence, then we can go for advocating and making regulations through that. I at least believe that, because even waste management came with a policy and we are advocating for a regulation. This is how they start all the time. So this is at least good news that they can consider endocrine disruptive chemical is one that needs to be assessed and apply measures on. And I went into some deeper analysis into legal provisions on cosmetics for the tested parabens. So for methylparaben, propylbutyl, and ethylparaben, we only follow the EU regulation, but we still detected this in certain levels in the samples that we provided. But unfortunately, we cannot take any legal measure, but of course, we keep advocating. Even recently, we raised this issue that although it's safe for, I mean, if it's considered safe in European countries, necessarily doesn't mean that it's safe for every human being. So if the researchers say that it's harmful, then it's as a country that does not have very strong health measures, should consider these scientific factors in decision making. So that was our advocacy letter. And of course, for the triclosan and triclocarbon, we found the same. It was not detected in any of the samples we provided, but still they are allowed in certain levels to be added in the cosmetics. So this is actually the evidence. If the cosmetic producers does not use these chemicals in their products, why have these elevated amounts allowed in these chemicals, cosmetics? So as for and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, we did not find any specific regulation for consumer products such as textiles. But of course, in the import license regulations, it's a set of chemicals were mentioned, set of PFAS were mentioned as substances that can be imported under the license. So this is something to be considered, and then we are following up on in making our regulations. Of course, about labeling, Sri Lanka, as I already mentioned, we also found this false labeling. In controlled cosmetics, it is mandatory that they mention all the ingredients included in the cosmetic, because it's therefore people can make informed these decisions. But still, we see in the market they are being violated. So we found several items either mentioning but have this chemical, or else sometimes they mention but they don't have the chemical, or they don't mention that they have the chemical. So these are the things that we follow up on. So CJ did not sit silent. Once we come up with these results, we shared through media, and we sent letters for the relevant authorities requesting, kind of urging that it is time that we take measures on these chemicals, especially PFAS, as a group rather than mentioning individual chemicals, because we need to pay attention to those who are at the borderline in controlling these chemicals. If they have enough scientific knowledge to verify each and every item entering the country, rather how can we set up regulations that are actually implemented at the ground level? So those kind of discussions we generally brought up in our stakeholder dialogues. And of course, we said that we need to set our own standards considering our health structure, because whatever is okay at EU would not be okay in a country like Sri Lanka. And of course, proper labeling is kind of a necessity. At least then we can urge the consumers to go for safer products, although the producers decided to keep on adding these chemicals. So with that, let me conclude my presentation. Before that, I want to thank IPEN, International Pollutants Elimination Network, and Anika, along with Wonjin Institute of Occupational and Environmental Health, and Korean Financial Industry Foundation for their incredible and relentless support in conducting these studies and coming up with these findings. And of course, as a policy advocacy leader, CEJ is much strengthened through this research data to follow up on these existing legal standards and to continue advocating on them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shalani. It's great to know that what you have been working in Sri Lanka, advocating for policy and making use of the research that we do, with IPEN, with the Wanshan Institute, and it's so great that you're continuing to also put pressure in your government to do more, and I hope that that will also be and you have somehow you've got the results, and you said that you will continue to work on that, and thank you so much. So from Sri Lanka, we will now have another resource person. I am so happy that he has agreed to also speak in our webinar to share about Japan's chemical substance control law and how EDC issues have been dealt with among environmental NGOs and the government agency. So we are grateful to Professor Shigeharu Nakachi of Kumamoto Gakuen University, and he is also the president of a very active IPEN-PO in Japan, the Toxic Watch Network. Professor Nakachi was born in 1956 in Shiga Prefecture, Japan. He graduated from the Faculty of Engineering in Kyoto University in 1988. In 1988, established the Environment Monitoring Institute of the Medical Corporation, NANRUCAI, and became a research fellow of the Institute. And from 2006 to March 2010, promoted to the managing director of the said institute. From 2004, he was the chairperson of the Toxic Watch Network Japan and the Ministry of Environment Policy Dialogue Committee on Chemical Substances in the Environment. And in 2010, became a professor at the School of Social Welfare and Environment in the Kumamoto Gakuen University. So Professor Nakachi, thank you so much for joining us in this webinar. The floor is yours now.
Thank you, Chinky.
Yes, we can hear you now.
スクリーンシェアリング、please. Just wait.
No worries. So again, thank you. I just also would like to remind everyone that if you have questions for our speakers, please type it at the Q&A box. Thank you. Okay, Professor Nakachi, I think you're ready now.
Ready? I start. Hello, everyone. I'm Shigeharu Nakachi, the chairperson of the Toxic Watch Network Japan. Today, I will explain the outline of Japan's chemical substance control law. It is abbreviated as CSCL. Furthermore, I will explain how endocrine disruptors are being handled and what the citizens movement is requesting from the Japanese government. to- Next slide. The official name of CSCL is Act on Regulation of Manufacture and Evaluation of Chemical Substances. The English version of the law created by the Japanese government can be viewed at the URL below. The purpose of this law is to prevent environmental pollution by chemical substances that may impair human health or interfere with the habitat and the growth of animals and plants. The English version of the Chemical Substances Management Policy website created by the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry can be viewed at the following URL. The CSCL was enacted in 1974 to ban the manufacture of PCBs after the 1968 Kanemi-Yusho food poisoning incident. Endocrine disrupting chemicals such as dioxin became problematic in the 1990s. However, the Japanese government has underestimated the risk and has not put any restrictions on its use. I'll explain the purpose and scope of the CSCL. Please note that the CSCL covers chemical substances are not included to medicine and pesticides. In order to achieve the 2020 targets, advanced evaluation is required for newly manufactured and imported chemical substances. In addition, for existing substances, it is mandatory to report the amount manufactured and imported, and the risk assessment is conducted every year. The outline of CSCL law can be summarized in one diagram as follows. This diagram was created by the METI. New chemicals must be evaluated before they can be placed on the market. New and existing chemical substances are risk assessed in terms of toxicity to humans and ecotoxicity, and highly toxic substances are ranked subject to regulation. Class 1, monitoring chemical substance, Class 2, specific chemical substance, and priority assessment chemical substances. Although it states that 28,000 substances are subject to the regulation. This is from October 2021, and currently there are said to be 30,000 substances. A characteristic Japan system is that the three are only a small number of substances that are highly toxic and subject to regulation. The following diagram explains how the risk assessment of priority assessment substances is carried out under the CSCL. METI perform a screening evaluation of general substances subject to the CSCL and narrow down the substances that require priority risk assessment. A panel and a panel of experts then conduct a risk assessment of toxicity to human and ecotoxicity to determine where the regulation is necessary. Substances that are determined to be highly hazardous are regulated class 1 and as or class 2 specified chemical substances. And once again, I would like to explain the chemical substance covered by the CSCL. Broadly speaking, substances that are manufactured and imported began after the enactment of the CSCL in 1974 are called new chemical substances. On the other hand, substances that were manufactured or imported before the enactment of CSCL are called existing chemical substances. Under the CSCL, new chemical substance and existing chemical substance are required to report the amount of production and import to the METI every year. Among the chemical substance, METI evaluated and classified the hazard chemical substance classified other than priority assessment chemical substances. Monitoring chemical substance, class 1 specified chemical substance, class 2 specified chemical substances. The problem with the CSCL are that compared to general chemical substance, the number of substances that are prohibited or restricted is small number. Class 1 specified chemical substance that are difficult, persistent, accumulate at a high level and have a long-term toxicity to humans or higher order predators. Rank number of 34 substances. For example, PCB, arginine, dildorine, DDT, PFOS, etc. Monitored chemical substances that are difficult, persistent, have a high accumulation rate, and have unknown toxicity. Until the presence or absence of long-term toxicity is determined, certain monitoring measure will be taken as a monitored chemical substance. Number is 38 substances. Class 2 specialized chemical substance with low accumulation and long-term toxicity to humans or animals and plants in the living environment is 23 substances. For example, trichloroethylene, tetrachloroethylene, triphenylphene, etc. I think the problem is that the number of chemical substances classified into 3 categories is a small number, and it cannot be said with certainty that the health and safety of citizens and the environment are being protected. I will explain the current status of the debate on whether to regulate endocrine disruptors in Japan. The target of toxicity evaluation under the CSCL are only acute toxicity, chronic toxicity, higher accumulate, and ecotoxicity. Endocrine disrupting toxicity is not subject to CSCL. The Ministry of Environment has created guidelines for endocrine disruptors and reviews them every few years, but has not considered regulations. The latest guidelines are extended 2022. There is no mention of the need for regulation. An overview of extended 2022 is provided on the English version of the Ministry of the Environmental website. The URL is follows. There is a strong demand from citizens that endocrine disruptors be also regulated as substance of high concern. At the policy dialogue on chemicals and environment, a roundtable discussion of all stakeholders, opinions from the citizen sector have been expressed for regulation. This concludes my explanation of the chemical substance control law, which is the basis of the Japanese chemical substance regulation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor Nakachi. So from what I understand, that Japan has regulation. From what I've heard, it's at first it's quite broad, but in reality, according to you, the implementation is also not that strong, and because only a few of the chemical substances are also covered by the law. So I would like to hear more of that in the Q&A portion later. And I know that your network has been doing a lot, so learning sessions, dialogue, and so on, in ensuring that the chemical substances, toxic chemicals, are being regulated in Japan. And thank you so much again for your time and for sharing your great work in Japan. So so our next speaker from Japan, we will now go back to Korea. We're very happy that our next speaker who will discuss the EDC policies in South Korea, Dr. Junhee Cho. He is a senior researcher at the Wonjin Institute of Occupational and Environmental Health. He obtained his doctorate in science, major in epidemiology, as well as his master's degree in cleaner production at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. He also holds a master's degree in public health from Korea University, and his research interests include toxic chemicals reduction, environmental epidemiology. So friends, please help me welcome Dr. Junhee Cho.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so let's share my slide. Okay, so I'm gonna... Okay, can I start right now?
Yes, please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Junhee Cho. I'm working at the Wonjin Institute for Occupational and Environment Health. Today, I'm going to represent a simple policy review for management of EDC in Korea. So today, I'm going to present the current status of chemical substance usage in Korea, including EDC. Also, I'm gonna show there some simple policy management policy for EDC. Also, I'm gonna present the future direction for the progress. So I'm not gonna go through the whole EDC stuff because we just keep saying that, but just to review that, what is EDC? And EDC means natural or human-made chemical that may mimic, block, or interfere with the body's hormones, so which is part of the endocrine system. So it could cause various health issues. And this is a CEPIC, so European Chemical Industry. So it showed us the World Chemical Sales 2020. So as you can see that China is the #1 chemical producer and seller, and EU, US follow that, and then number 3 is Japan and South Korea. So South Korea is the 5th largest country. It's used a lot of chemical and produced a lot. And this graph actually illustrates the trend of substance, chemical usage, and chemical release. And if you see this right one and focus on the chemical usage from the 1998 and 2020, the trend of chemical usage has been sharply increased. You can see that, and it is almost 5 or 7 times higher. And then the number of the black dot, the number of the reporting chemical number also up to the 35,000. And so chemical usage has been sharply increased. And chemical release, the trend is also has been increased a lot, but the trend is a little bit different. It's sharply increased, and then the 2004, it seems to me pretty stable. I think the behind this change could be effective of the regulation. South Korea adopted the regulation. It's called the PRTR in 1998, and then the regulation could change the industry. Also, I also think about that some limitation of this survey from the government, the chemical substance statistics, is only focused on the 500 chemical report, and this, as you can see there, it is only focused on the up to the 250. So this graph is not fully cover the whole chemical emission in South Korea, but the trend is meaningful. So this graph also showed some trend of the major EDC uses. As you can see that the trend is the EDC usage has been increased for the decade. So here is the reference for the chemical substance statistics survey. I also emphasize that this is not cover the whole EDC chemical. It's only reported 19 EDC chemical in the statistics survey. That's the limitation. So previous study indicated that South Korea produced a lot of chemical, used a lot of chemical. So how about the Korean population? I found some research paper that compare the EDC level in between Korea and other country, and it's found interesting. I found very interesting point. Okay, so the EDC level in Korea population, like a BPA, is much higher than compared to the US, Canada, EU. And phthalate level also much higher, with almost 3 times higher than the US and Canada. this means is simply the EDC level in Korean population is much, much higher. But as you can see, there's some people say that, okay, how about the BPF? BPS level is lower than the US and Canada. What's happened? And I just think that BPF, BPS used as an alternative of BPA. So Korea still use BPA a lot. So the BPA level in the Korean population is still higher. But the other advanced country starting to switch from BPA to BPF earlier than the Korea. So that's why the BPF level in their population is higher than our population. That's what I'm thinking about this condition. And this is from the Wang's report, and it's also supported this condition. The phthalate level in Korea population was higher than the US and Europe. And okay, so South Korea used a lot of chemical, and then the Korea population has higher EDC level in their body. So how about the disease? That's my next slide show that. And I just found there's some kind of statistics report about the trend of prevalence rate. So it's related about the EDC related disease in Korea. So one disease is hard to pronounce, the endometriosis. And then the other one is the precocious puberty. We just call it early puberty. So as you can see that endometriosis has a lot of pain and hard to get pregnant. And the trend of this one is kind of has been sharply increasing. And the early puberty, precocious puberty, or that means it's a child's physical sign of the sexually maturity develops soon. And then the trend of the precocious puberty has been sharply increased. So some experts say that, okay, we used a lot of chemical, including EDC, then our exposure level of EDC is higher. That may be related with this kind of trend. So EDC related disease has sharply increased. It can be due to the EDC exposure. So before we jump to the Korea regulation, I just want to simply summarize the whole around the world from our history. So EDC related accidents happen in follow that. So for example, so DDT used a long time in the 1962. So Rach Carlson published a famous book, Silent Spring. So we people start thinking about that. What problems happen all around the world? 1968, the Kanami rice oil is contaminated with PCB. That caused a lot of happenings. More than the 14,000 people was affected. And then 1971, DES is contained in some prescribed medicine, and then it is for the actually it used for the pregnant woman and caused some cancer. And then PBB in the Michigan in US actually created environmental crisis, and thousands of livestock like cow was killed because of this one. And I'm not gonna go through the whole this one. Dupont people is a very well-known accident, and Dark Water, the movie, is described this kind of story very well. But my point is, the EDC accident has happened long time, but our regulation is very slowly followed it. So only the 1971, I just found that the DDT is stopped using in the US. But that's, at the time, we just focus on only DDT. In science, it's followed very slowly. In 1991, we think about simply determine the declaration of the EDC. So right now we think about how can we approach the EDC. Then regulation much later, 2007, EU starting the stop the phthalate use in the children's toy, and then EU and US stopped the BPA in the baby bottle 2011 and 2012. So how about the Korea? So Korea has a bunch of the regulation related with the chemicals. Each regulation has their own purpose. For example, Occupational Safety and Health Act, that's the protect for the worker safety and health. Toxic Chemical Control Act, that's the for prevent the chemical accident and protect the community due to the chemical accident. So many chemicals essentially regulate. However, this chemical was not designed for EDC regulation. So certain regulation, but has some relationship or partly include some EDC. For example, K-REACH and KCCA. K-REACH is very similar like EU REACH. So industry should report their chemical information to the government. If you see the K-REACH, there is some list is called intensive control substance, and that's include EDC. So total 669 chemical were listed in K-REACH, and then only 17 EDC recently listed in this intensive control list. And Korea Chemical Control Act, they have also their own list, 1,145, and about 130 chemical related with EDC also include this list. However, as I already said, that it's not was designed for the manager of the EDC. So that's the list. It's not kind of fully regulated EDC. But certain EDC kind of more strongly regulated for packing in the children's product. For example, the use of the D-butyl phthalate, DBP, or BBP and BPA is strongly prohibited in the children's toy. And the other bisphenol A phthalate also has some cannot be used more than the limitation level. So certain EDC chemical has some specific regulation. I want to say then, okay, right now South Korea has some regulation. It's not fully cover the whole EDC. However, certain well-known EDC is starting to regulate. How about the next? I believe the increasing concern over the chronic effects of chemical substance, EDC, so that's why the regulation of the EDC is growing more stricter, the growing trend of toward strength. For that, so we should emphasize the precautionary principle. To regulate the chemical, the South Korea government strongly believe that causal relationship based on the risk of a chemical. However, EU or European EU like EU, they just think about the different direction. They just emphasize the precautionary principle, and then they just presented EDC suspected EDC chemical list is about more than the 500. So then they just kind of keep saying that this one should be regulated. I think that this one is very important for us too. So not only focus on the certain 20, 30 or less than the 50 chemical, we just have to expand our regulate chemical of EDC to the expected level. So before that, I just finished my presentation. I just want to share my mentor. I think I just said that the context and motivation are very important to social innovation. But without the leadership, the good opportunity can evaporate. I believe EDC is becoming a good opportunity for change, but without the leadership, we can lose this kind of the opportunity to social innovation. So please, we have to make a good context and motivation together, and to make our government push our government to move forward. That's my final presentation. Please, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cho, for sharing the trends of EDCs in Korea and also about the existing policies. I think it's interesting to note that the country is progressing. There are already regulations on, as you said, 17 EDCs are already included in the K-REACH, and also I was happy to see for children choice there are certain regulations and for the food packaging. So thank you. I think we'll maybe interact with you more in the discussion and the Q&A to find out more about the implementation and other discussions about the policies. So moving on to now to share about the EU policy on EDCs and the role of NGOs in pushing for EDC policies is Pia Joel-Nielsen from ChemTrust. So Pia is an EDC science and policy expert. She has been working as a senior advisor to ChemTrust since May 2019 with a main focus on endocrine disruptors. She has worked on EU EDC policies for over 2 decades, and before joining ChemTrust, she worked as a chief advisor and deputy head of the chemicals division at the Danish EPA. Over the last few years, she closely followed the fight to establish new EDC criteria, which have now been integrated also as new hazard classes under the EU classification regime for harmful chemicals. And there are now discussions to include these also under the GHS system. So ChemTrust works as part of the overall NGO EDC Free Europe coalition. So thank you for taking time to be with us today, Pia, and we are glad to have you with us. So please go ahead and share your presentation.
Thank you for the kind introduction. I'll share my presentation. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Can you see now?
It's loading. Yes, we can see it now.
Yeah, but I can't find the. It's the presentation mode. Don't get the, the.
It's in the bottom. If you go down.
Yeah, but I can't see it. That's the problem.
Yeah.
What can I do?
You can see in the tab above also, slideshow.
Let me see. That's the problem. Let me see. I'm really sorry for that, but
Pia, would you like me to share your slides if that's okay with you?
Yeah, let's please do that. Yeah, maybe it's easy.
Okay.
Yeah,
let me.
Because well now, sorry, was there? So is it now?
Yeah, it's here.
It's difficult to see, but I hope the others can read it better. Okay, so hello to everyone participating in this EDC Free Asia event. First, I want to thank for the invitation to give a presentation on the ED policies and endocrine disruptors and what NGOs can do to push for EDC policies. As you've heard, my name is Pia Juel Nielsen. I work as an EDC science and policy expert for ChemTrust, and I also worked nearly 20 years at the Danish Ministry of the Environment, and where for more than 10 years initiated and coordinated the work on endocrine disruptors. And I've also been a seconded national expert at the European Commission. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. So who is ChemTrust? It's an NGO, a collaboration between the UK charity ChemTrust and ChemTrust Europe in Germany, working at UK, EU, and global levels to protect humans and wildlife from harmful chemicals, with a focus on identification and action on endocrine disruptors. And ChemTrust has been involved in this work since the foundation in 2007 and has been deeply involved in the European debate on EDC criteria. ChemTrust has published several technical reports and policy papers, for example, on a new path of EU control of endocrine disruptors and on EDCs and how to identify EDs under the CLP, and also on bisphenols and chemical cocktails, and you can find all of them on our website. Next slide, please. I'll also highlight that ChemTrust is part of the NGO coalition EDC Free Europe, which consists of more than 70 NGOs in Europe working on phasing out the use of EDCs. And in 2018, the coalition set up 8 demands for an EU ED strategy. And in 2020, the coalition also published key recommendations for a reformed European regulatory framework on EDCs. And you can find all the documents and recent articles of the Free Coalition via the links in the bottom of the slide. Next slide, please. So we need some regulation to control the exposure to EDCs. An essential element for such regulation is that we have information on the ED activity and effects, that we have some criteria for how to identify an EDC, and not least that the legal text include consequences of the identification as an EDC. And therefore, ChemTrust has for many years advocated that the priorities for minimizing exposure to EDC should be to extend the information and data requirements for chemicals under REACH, to swiftly identify EDCs in 2 categories, reflecting the existing data gap on EDCs, because to increase protection, we need to also identify and regulate those substances that are suspected EDCs. And finally, to include protective rules in all relevant EU legislation with a focus on phasing out EDCs. This is important for consumer use and particularly important for sensitive uses such as toys, cosmetics, and food contact materials. Next slide, please. This is a very busy slide. It's mainly to show the long history of EDCs and that a lot has happened on various fronts. But still, protection against EDCs in the EU is not sufficient, as many EDCs are still used in great variety of consumer products. So as NGOs in Europe, we are constantly working to speed up the legal processes so that protection from exposure to EDCs become real for people. As you can see, I have listed the various actions on a timeline and divided them by topic with coloring. So black indicates activities in relation to information about EDCs, starting with the Weybridge workshop in 1996. Light blue indicates identification activities, for example, the WHO definition from 2002, and red indicates consequence and legal activities. The timeline also indicates the EU initiatives on research, from the 5th framework program to the ongoing Horizon Europe. And the EU Commission EDC-related policies initiatives are colored dark blue. The EU Commission strategy on EDCs from 1999 with the update in 2018, and also the European Green Deal. As you can see, already in 2006, the REACH regulation on industrial chemicals included some legal consequences for EDCs, followed by the pesticides and biocides regulation in 2009 and 12 with their subsequent EDC criteria in 2017 and 18 respectively. The new horizontal criteria for EDC identification was legally adopted in 2023 by the revised CLP regulation, and I will come back to this in a minute. So, and some ongoing activities as CLP, EDC guidance, and revision of several regulations are indicated with italics. Next slide, please. And now to the CLP, which is the European implementation of UN Global Harmonized System for Classification, Labeling, and Packaging of Chemicals. After lengthy, intensive, and very difficult negotiations in the EU, it was a big achievement that the revised CLP, including new hazard classes for EDCs, was adopted last year. And this will not immediately change the world, but it will set the basis for more protection against EDCs. And this is the first time in the world to introduce legal horizontal criteria for identification of EDCs. And this is criteria with two categories to reflect the level of evidence for endocrine disrupting properties. And this step will also have global implications as the legislation commits the EU to bring the criteria to the UNGSS. And this process is already ongoing, and ChemTrust is participating in the scientific part of this under the OECD. The legislation enters into force 1st of May next year for substances and 1 year later for mixtures. And there will be a transition period for products on the market. However, manufacturers can use the hazard classes already now. As you know, this is a very complex area, so there is a need for scientific advice to the authorities and stakeholders. And ChemTrust is part of this ongoing work on preparing a CLP guidance for ED identification, and this will probably be finalized later this year. A prerequisite for EDC identification is relevant information, and therefore a process is initiated to update REACH information requirements for chemicals to include info on EDC properties. Next slide, please. The ED identification in the new criteria is separated for human health and the environment. Scientifically, this makes no sense in our view, but the GSS and CLP already built on such separation. The CLP criteria is based on the scientific WHO definition, but it has been adapted to fit into a regulatory context. For a substance to be identified or classified as an EDC, there needs to be shown endocrine activity and adverse effect. And there should be a biological plausible link between the adversity and the endocrine activity. So substances are classified as known or presumed endocrine disruptors in ED category 1 when the evidence is convincing. And what was very important to us was that the inclusion of a second category for suspected endocrine disruptors when there is substantial evidence for endocrine disruptions, however not convincing for classification in category 1. And this means that more precautions can be taken instead of waiting many years for more convincing data. But I would also say it should be emphasized that these criteria will still require a very high level of evidence for identification of EDCs. Next slide, please. So now to the consequences of ED identification, the regulation of EDCs. Already today, substances can be identified in the EU as so-called substances of very high concern under REACH due to endocrine disrupting properties, and this will have some regulatory consequences. But this identification process has been very slow. So until now, only around 25 substances have been identified as EDCs for either human health or the environment. And some of them are listed here. The same picture is seen for biocides and pesticides, even though the criteria for these sectors have been enforced for some years now. But you can find more on this on the ECHA official website. It can be very difficult to find out which substances have been identified by the EU as EDCs, because until now, the Commission has been very hesitant to publish EDC lists. Therefore, 6 European countries have launched a joint database where you can find all the EDCs officially identified by the EU. And you've already seen that in the first presentation where there was a reference to these lists. REACH have also restricted the use of some EDCs for certain uses, and this will also include products imported from outside Europe. For example, this is the case for use of phthalates in indoor consumer products, where the restriction covers the combined exposure to 4 phthalates. The big advantage of including EDC hazard classes to the CLP is that the CLP is an overarching regulation that directly has downstream consequences for other regulations that regulate substances based on the CLP classification. For example, category 1 EDCs are banned as pesticides and biocides, and CMR substances are in general not allowed for consumer use toys and cosmetics, and work is now ongoing to also include EDCs in this general ban. Next slide, please. So what can NGOs do to push for actions on EDCs? First of all, it's important to engage and get scientific support from national or international scientists working on EDCs. This can support building up the scientific arguments that may help to demand protective measures from the authorities. And just now you can keep an eye on the UN GSS work and try to push your national UN representatives to support the inclusion of EDCs in the GSS. It's also important to raise awareness about EDC substances, demanding safer consumer products without EDCs for daily use. And in this work, you can use and refer to the EU list of EDCs. And crucial for the pressure on companies and the authorities is public engagement. So there is a need for public awareness campaign, and this is a job for NGO. And I really noted and appreciated the video you showed just before, because I think that was really good, and you can use that for public awareness campaigns. And experience has actually shown that public pressure can be powerful and a game changer for the market, because it is crucial for pressure on companies and authorities is the public engagement. So there is a need for this public awareness campaign, and this is a job for the NGOs. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, the EU has taken significant steps to generate more information about EDCs and acknowledging their harm and for human health and environment. And now identification and better control of EDCs must go faster. But to speed up this process, public awareness in all countries is important. So there is a need for public action to push for substitution and regulation. And this is the only way forward to ensure global control of EDCs. So thank you for your attention. You can find more about ChemTrust's work via the link. And the last slide, if I can have that, is actually the EDC Free Europe coalition members. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pia. Thank you so much for waking up very early to share with us the great work that you do in Europe. I've learned a lot from your presentation. Thank you so much. So Tripti, so I think we will be now giving time for the question and answer portion. Can we ask all the speakers to please open your video? And then for all those who have questions, kindly type your answers, your questions in the, yeah, okay. So I'm just adding the spotlight so we can all see the speakers. Okay, Tripti, I think you have a question because there are questions sent to us directly. So I will allow Tripti to read the first question while I'll add the highlights.
Thank you, Chinky. Thank you, everyone, for the great presentations. So I think I will allow Anuradha. Chinky, can you allow Anuradha? Because she has a question for Chalani.
Sure. Okay. Okay, Anuradha, you can speak now.
Anuradha, please go ahead and ask your question to Chalani.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you to all the presenters. It was really very informative, and a lot of capacity has been built about the regulations in the various countries. So my question is basically, I would like to understand, and I think all the speakers can definitely give their views. Like Chalani mentioned that in the 30 samples that were collected, I think in 6 of them, EDCs were identified. And I would especially like to know one thing, like in erasers, she pointed out that erasers had, just a minute, I had noted it somewhere. Yeah, right. There were phthalates in around 5 out of 40 erasers. And in Rubik cubes also, POPs, POPs were identified. So my question is, like in case of feeding bottles, the bottle is being touched by the infants or by the babies. But in case of these kind of products, which are Rubik cubes or maybe erasers, the hazard of the release of EDC happens at the time of disposal, or how exactly do they become a threat or a problem? That part is not very clear to me, because unless we consume them, either we inhale them or we eat them, or they are in touch with our skin. So how does that happen? I don't know if my
One,
question is clear.
yes, clear. One, do you want to answer? I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, yeah. The phthalate content that is used in the products, if in this case the phthalate is not covalently fixed in the products, it can be easily reached out to the environment. So if one handle or use the erasers which contain the phthalate, in our result, the phthalate content in the erasers maybe 10% or up to 30 to 40%. So it contains very high level of phthalate, and the phthalate can be easily reached out to the environment. So the phthalate can be connected with the dust, and the dust around the children or someone in the environment can be exposed to the dust which contain the phthalate. So this is the one of the exposure route can be done in our living environment. So the problem is that the EDs in the products can be easily reached out to the environment, and we can expose to those kinds of chemical in the environment. So the direct touch with those products is not the simple case, but the another exposure route could be one of the exposure sources. That is
Thank
what
you
I
so
want
much.
to explain.
Yeah,
I
thank
also
you
wanted
so
to
much.
add, uh, uh,
Yeah, one more
I just,
question related to this is like, as you very well mentioned, Professor Kim. So I think we also need to have some regulations about the proper disposal of the products containing the EDCs, not just the manufacturing part and the regulations about the usage, but also about the disposal once the usage is of course we have to, the regulation should be strong that it should not be used at all in the first place. EDCs should be abolished or abandoned. But in case they are being used in various levels, I think there should be strict regulations about the disposals also. So are there some regulations about the disposal of products which have been identified with ED, like the cosmetics and the various range? That is my second question. So maybe Chalani can answer first, and then thank you so much.
no,
It was just
okay.
my doubt. Thank you.
Thank you, Anuradha. No, I just wanted to add another point for the previous question. You know, when we studied about these thermal paper bills, we came across that if you handle these bills with oily hands, they can leach out to your through your skin. So something like that. Of course, your point is right. These waste should be handled in a proper manner, but I mean, unfortunately, countries like ours are not that effective or efficient in waste handling. They would most of the time, these waste would go for incinerators or landfills. But of course, they should be properly handled as waste. And in our cases also, we found, if you can remember, that recycled plastic pellets had these chemicals in them. So whatever the products built of them will be having these chemicals. So ultimately, by handling them, we get ourselves exposed to these. And of course, that's why we say that plastic recycling is a false solution, because it keeps on polluting the life cycle of plastics.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Chalani. Thank you. Dr. Kim, do you want to add anything? Or is that okay?
No, I have no idea about the waste. I just focus on
Yeah.
the products.
Thank you. So yeah, let's move on to the next question. Thank you, Anuradha, for your question. So the next question is about the sufferings from EDCs. So there's a question that reproductive disorders such as reduction of number of sperm among young males in the 1990s and early in the 2000s in Japan have been reported. However, recently more attention has been paid to children's developmental disorders such as ADHD, autism, etc. So is this a case in your countries? So this is a question by Ryochi. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right, but yeah, so do any of the presenters would like to take this question?
Well, from Sri Lankan side, I would say that we have not studied these effects of EDCs that depth. For example, we came across recently that the pellets from the express pearl ship accident contains these kind of chemicals, including EDCs. But the women in the area are employed in cleaning up them. So no health check, no surveillance or anything is carried out. And if these cases comes, they are only in research papers most of the time, fortunately.
Thank you, Chalani.
And,
yes,
and
please.
oh, okay.
Okay, thank you. I can just say I've just participated in the Copenhagen workshop of endocrine disruptors, and I can say from a European perspective, I mean, it's the same trends, I guess, all over Europe. And now we come to the situation where we actually can do all the biomonitoring, and we can link this to effects in human health, and we can see the same effects as we've seen in experimental animals. So this is not a really good, you could say, development. We can actually link several concentrations from the fetus, exposure as fetus, to mental disorders and language problems and so on later in life.
Thank you, Priya. Yes, Dr. Wong, please go ahead.
No, Dr. Cho. Wait,
Okay.
have a mic.
Sorry, Dr. Cho.
Okay. So I just want to answer the previous question and this question too. So for the disclosure policy of EDC, I think we would better focus on the product thing instead of the disclosure, because if we think about if we want to make some disclosure policy of EDC, that means is some government or some agency should analyze whether this disclosure includes the EDC or not. And then without that, the policy cannot work. And then I think that this is kind of waste of energy. So we just still government to think about the industry should not use the EDC at the source so it's the more effective way to make a policy. So that's my answer the previous question. And then second question, in Korea, a bunch of various epidemiology and monitoring research is ongoing right now between children diabetes and EDC, also a bunch of the mental health and then EDC. But I cannot see any kind of the statistically significant relations between EDC and other children's diseases right now. But as more we have some record or some more information about EDC information, it could be showed us some good sign of the relationship. Hopefully, I hope somehow we can get there. That's my answer.
Thank you, Dr. Cho. I think I kind of agree with you on that. So yeah, thank you. Chinky, do you want to ask the question?
Yeah, thank you so much to our speakers and to all those who asked questions. So we are seeing more questions, but we are really running out of time. Maybe for the last question, if we can ask Professor Nakachi, if you have some tips, because I'm really amazed of how you work with the Toxic Watch Network. Some tips for the NGOs on how we can really pursue policy lobby on EDCs in different countries, especially in countries without EDC regulation yet. Do you have some recommendations or tips on how we can effectively do it?
If I can say a little bit, I started in the Danish EPA back in 2001, where we started up all the work on EDCs. And it has been a tough job, but I would say that you need to engage the public. I mean, the public pressure is really essential. And then you need to to manage or to modulate the regulators in a way. I mean, put some pressure on the politicians. I mean, it was from that background it all started in Denmark, I could say, because you tried to push the politicians, and then there was a lot of public awareness. So this was the way forward, and in the end, the politicians couldn't resist not doing anything. So that. Yeah, at least that's one way to go.
Okay, thank you so much, Pia. Yeah, so I'm gonna request Professor Nakachi if you have something to add more, of if none, it's okay. For questions who are not answered, we will try to gather all the questions and send to our speakers and send it to you. If you have more questions also, you can send it to us, to me and Tripti, and we will request our speakers to answer the questions. All right. So I think we're okay now. Thank you again to our speakers and to all the questions and to all the attendees. May I now request Dr. Joe Diganji, IPEN Special Advisor, for his closing remarks. Joe?
Yeah, yes, thank you very much, Chinky, and greetings to all participants and viewers. Thanks to all the presenters for their very interesting presentations. I would just like to make 3 quick points as closing comments. The first is that if you are an NGO representative or even a government agency, a person who's interested in further work on EDCs, there are a lot of resources that are available to you. The first is that the presenters in this webinar, and those presenters include an NGO that even has an analytical laboratory, which is highly unusual. The second is that you have a lot of reports that are available to you. This includes reports released by IPEN and the Endocrine Society, a series of them, and the UNEP WHO State of the Science report. There are also political declarations. Within the SciChem process, there are 2 global resolutions that represent the consensus agreement of more than 100 governments. And also for colleagues in the Asia-Pacific region, there is a consensus agreement among the 55 governments in the Asia-Pacific region, specifically about EDCs. And finally, about resources, the Endocrine Society is a global association of scientists and health professionals that work on the endocrine system, and they may be able to provide some scientific resources to you if you are interested in further work. The second quick point is that EDCs as a topic can bring together groups that work on industrial pesticides and industrial chemicals and pesticides. EDCs are commonly thought of as a chemicals in consumer product issue, but the active ingredients of pesticides and the so-called inert ingredients can also be EDCs, and these have been identified by UNEP. They are talked about and reviewed in the UNEP, in the IPEN Endocrine Society reports, and they have also been identified by the European Food Safety Authority. The final point is that work on EDCs is highly relevant to the current plastics treaty negotiation. There are the famous ones like phthalates and nonylphenol and bisphenol A, but there are many others. And recently, Norwegian and Swiss authors released the State of the Science on Plastic Chemicals. And this report describes EDCs in this way. They say that there is a strong interconnection between plastic chemicals and endocrine disruption. So your work on EDCs can help strengthen national positions on measures in the treaty to deal with the large number of chemicals associated with plastics. Thanks again to the presenters and organizers, and I wish all colleagues here good luck in all their projects. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joe. And I think that ends our webinar. Tripti, would you like to say something before we end?
Thank you, Chinky. Thank you, Joe, for the closing remarks. I think it was a wonderful webinar, and I think I found it very interesting to learn from different countries, and I think it will contribute to our work towards, working on EDCs and leading to more regulations. And yeah, thank you. So I think Chinky will let us know about feedback for the webinar that we are trying to get. But yeah, thank you to all the participants and the speakers for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Tripti, and everyone, speakers, attendees, thank you. So when we end this webinar, a survey question will pop up on your screen. So please respond to the question so we will know how we can improve better. Thank you so much again, everyone, speakers, attendees, co-organizers. Bye, everyone, and keep safe.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Have a great day.